is what I see by my intellect." He paused, his gaze sweeping the battle-scarred landscape before them. "Do therefore quickly, and without loss of time, what should now be done after proper reflection. Drana's face set in determination. He rose to his feet. "Let us search for the Pandavas once more," he declared, his voice carrying across the expanse of Kurukshetra. "We will send Brahmanas and Charanus, ascetics crowned with success, and others who may have a knowledge of those heroes." Vaisampayana nodded in agreement, and together they set their plan in motion, driven by a deep faith in the invincibility of the Pandavas as they dispatched their search parties. Drona's thoughts turned to Yudhishthira, his heart filled with admiration for the young king. The son of Pritha is capable of consuming his foes by a glance alone of his eyes. In the midst of the gathering, Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Bharatas, rose from his seat. His eyes shone with a deep understanding as he spoke words that would echo through the ages. He commended Drona's speech, acknowledging its truth and virtue. "His words are like a gentle breeze on a summer day," Bhishma said, refreshing and invigorating to those who listened. The assembly was silent, mesmerized by the old sage's words. Bhishma continued, his voice dripping with conviction. "I have no hesitation in saying that Drona's words are the very embodiment of truth." As he spoke, Bhishma gazed at Yudhishthira, his eyes filled with a deep affection. He sought in the young king a reflection of the virtuous and just ruler that he had always been, those heroic ones. Bhishma said, referring to Yudhishthira's brothers, are like lotus flowers that bloom in the midst of adversity. They will never wither under misfortune, for they are aided by their own strength and virtue. Bhishma paused, his eyes scanning the assembly as if searching for any who might disagree with him. His voice took on a gentle tone as he said, "I propose that we seek the counsel of wise men to guide us in our behavior towards the sons of Pandu. We must not cause them harm or reveal their whereabouts to those who would do them evil." The assembly was silent once more, each member lost in thought as they considered Bhishma's words. The old sage continued, his voice filled with a deep conviction. "I dare not speak ill of anyone," he said, "but I must say that my mind is clear on this matter. We should strive to do what is right and just, even if it means going against the desires of some." As Bhishma finished speaking, the assembly erupted into a murmur of agreement and dissent. Some nodded their heads in approval, while others looked on with skepticism. But one thing was certain: Bhishma's words had planted a seed of doubt in the minds of those who listened. The wise old sage then began to describe the characteristics of the place where Yudhishthira resided. There, he said, "The people are charitable and liberal, humble and modest. They live in harmony with one another, their speech filled with kindness and compassion." Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture of a utopian society, where the air was sweet with the scent of incense, and the sound of Vedic hymns filled the air. There, he said, the people are contented and cheerful, pure in conduct, and free from misery. They live in devotion to the gods and guests, their hearts filled with kindness and generosity. As Bhishma finished speaking, the assembly was in the midst of a grand assembly. Vaisampayana stood before King Dhritarashtra and began to recount the words of Kripa, son of Saradwa. "The venerable Bhishma has spoken the truth about the Pandavas," Kripa said with conviction. "His words are wise, just, and in line with virtue. They have been uttered at a time when we must consider our actions carefully." Kripa's eyes gleamed with intensity as he continued to speak. "We should send spies to discover the path the Pandavas have taken and their current about. We must also adopt a strategy that will bring us prosperity." He paused, surveying the assembly. Before him, one who is concerned about his own well-being should not ignore even a minute. "For what then shall we do when faced with the Pandavas, masters of all arms in battle?" As Kripa spoke, the weight of his words settled upon the assembly like a gentle mist. The king's advisors and nobles leaned forward, their faces filled with concern. They knew that the return of the Pandavas was inevitable, for their exile would soon come to an end when the time arrives for them to reappear. Kripa said, his voice steady and calm, "We must know our own strength within our kingdom and among other kingdoms. We should prepare ourselves by increasing our forces and replenishing our treasury." The assembly fell silent as Kripa's words hung in the air like a challenge. They knew that they had to act swiftly, for the Pandavas were not ordinary foes. "We must use diplomacy and strategy," Kripa continued, his voice growing more urgent. "We should employ the arts of conciliation, dissonant chastisement, bribery, gifts, and fair behavior. We should strengthen our army and fill our treasury, so that when the time comes to face the Pandavas, we will be ready." As Kripa finished speaking, a sense of determination settled over the assembly. They knew that they had been given wise counsel by one who understood the complexities of war and diplomacy. With renewed resolve, they set about implementing Kripa's words, knowing that their success depended on their ability to adapt and prepare for the return of the Pandavas. The days turned into weeks, and the assembly worked tirelessly to strengthen their army and treasury. They dispatched spies to gather intelligence on the Pandavas' whereabouts and employed diplomats to negotiate with other kingdoms. As they worked, a sense of hope began to grow within them, hope that they would be ready when the time came for the Pandavas to reappear, but little did they know their preparations were only just beginning. The return of the Pandavas was still far off, and many challenges lay ahead. Yet with Kripa's wise counsel guiding them, they pressed on, determined to emerge. In the land of Virata, where mighty kingdoms rose and fell, King Duryodhana of the Kuras faced a daunting challenge. For years, his kingdom had been plagued by the Susa tribe, led by the formidable Kekeka, who was aided by the Matsyas, and Salias, the mighty king of the Trigartas. Sazarman had long suffered at their hands, losing many a battle and seeing his kingdom ravaged. And day, as Sazarman sat in council with King Duryodhana, he sought an opportunity to turn the tables on their foes. He spoke with urgency. "My king, our kingdom has been invaded by the Matsyas many times before. Kekeka was their generalissimo, a cruel and wicked man feared across the land. But now that he's fallen at the hands of the Gandharvas, I think we should strike while the iron is hot." He proposed an audience with Duryodhana and his brother Karna to invade Virata's kingdom, which was said to be rich in cattle and treasures. Duryodhana's eyes lit up at the prospect of plundering their enemies' wealth. He turned to Karna, who agreed that the time was ripe for action. "We must draw up our forces and march on Virata's city." Karna urged, "Let us seize his cattle by the thousands and bring glory to our kingdom." The two brothers consulted with their elders, including the wise Drona and Kripa, who advised them to proceed with caution. The sun rose over the Kuras kingdom. King Duryodhana gave a series of commands. He instructed his brother Dasesana to array the troops without delay, while Sazarman led the Trigartas towards Virata's dominions. The plan was for Sazarman to arrive first under the guise of a peaceful visit, and then be followed by the Kauravas in force a day after. As the dark fortnight drew to a close, the Kauravas set out towards Matsya's kingdom, their hearts filled with anticipation. The Trigartas, led by Sazarman, marched swiftly towards Virata's city, intent on seizing his vast herds of cattle. As they approached, the cowards, unaware of the impending danger, went about their daily tasks. The fate of Virata's kingdom hung in the balance as two armies converged upon it, one led by Sazarman and the Trigartas, the other by King Duryodhana and his brother Karna. The stage was set for a clash that would shake the very foundations of Virata. In the midst of their 13th year in exile, the Pandavas, those mighty sons of Kunti, had found refuge in the kingdom of Virata, disguised as commoners. They had been living incognito in the city under the protection of King Virata himself. The high-souled warriors had completed their promised period of non-discovery, and now, with their secrets safe, they were an integral part of the king's court. But fate had other plans. Sazarman, a ruthless cattle thief, had begun to seize thousands of Virata's prized livestock. The herdsman, desperate to inform his king about the crisis, hastened to the city and appeared before King Virata in the midst of his wise counselors and the Pandavas themselves. The herdsman bowed down to the king, his voice trembling with urgency. "Almighty king," he said, "our friends, the Trigartas, have joined forces with Sazarman and are taking our cattle by hundreds and thousands. You must act swiftly to rescue them, lest they be lost forever." King Virata listened intently, his expression a mix of concern and resolve. He summoned his warriors and began to prepare for battle. The army of Matsya was an imposing force with its abundance of chariots, elephants, horses, and infantrymen. Each warrior donned their shining armor adorned with burnished gold and precious gems. The king's beloved brother wore a coat of mail made from adamant steel, while Medariksha, next in birth to Satanaka, chose a strong plate made of gold-plated steel. The king himself donned an invulnerable coat decked with 100 suns and 100 eyes. Shriyadatta, another brave warrior, wore a bright coat plated with gold as wide as 100 lotus flowers. As the army prepared for battle, King Virata addressed his brother Satanaka, Kanka, Valavatan, Tripala, and Damagranth. "I are fierce warriors who will undoubtedly fight valiantly. Give them cars with banners, and let them wear beautiful coats of mail that are both impenetrable and easy to wear." Satanaka immediately ordered the preparation of chariots for the Pandavas. Yudhishthira Nakula and Sahadeva, the king's charioteers, worked swiftly, eager to please their lord, those mighty warriors. Then donned their new armor and mounting their chariots, yoked with good steeds, they set up towards the battlefield. The army of Virata marched forth, his splendor unmatched. 60 elephants, each over 60 years old, with shapely tusks and rent temples, followed the king's chariot like moving hills. The principal warriors of Matsya, numbering 8,000 chariots, 1,000 elephants. The sun beat down upon the dusty plains as two armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. The Matsyas, led by the fearless warriors Satyaki and Drupada, marched out of their city to confront the Trigartas, who had been terrorizing their kingdom for far too long. As the two armies met, the air was filled with the thunder of drums and the screams of war horses. The Trigartas, led by the mighty Sazarman, were a force to be reckoned with. But the Matsyas were not intimidated. With swords drawn and bows at the ready, the two armies charged into battle. A clash of steel on steel echoed across the plain as the warriors fought on foot and horseback elephants, their tusks gleaming in the sunlight, rampaged through the ranks, trampling the enemy beneath their massive feet. The sound of arrows whizzing through the air was like a chorus of deadly birds striking true time and again. As the battle raged on, the dust clouds grew thicker, obscuring the sun from view. Birds fell from the sky, blinded by the swirling vortex of chaos. Below, the very firmament seemed to tremble with the force of the combatants' fury. It was as if the gods themselves had descended upon the earth, unleashing a maelstrom of destruction and mayhem. Yet even in the midst of such carnage, there were moments of beauty to be seen. A warrior's armor glinted like gold in the sunlight, his sword flashing with deadly precision. The trunks of Sala trees seemed to come alive as the bodies of fallen soldiers littered the ground, and amidst it all the sound of vultures crying out for sustenance filled the air. As the battle reached its climax, two warriors emerged from the fray, Satyaki and Suzarman, their cars thundering towards each other like Titans. The king of the Trigartas, mounted on a golden chariot, challenged the king of the Matsyas to single combat. The two warriors clashed, their arrows flying swift and true. King Virata, the ruler of the Matsyas, rode forth with Shriyadatta and Mendareksha by his side. Together they charged into the heart of the Trigarta host, cutting down hundreds of enemy soldiers in their wake. And when at last they faced Sozarman himself, the king of the Trigartas proved to be a formidable foe for hours. The two armies clashed, neither gaining the upper hand. The dust clouds grew thicker still until it seemed as though the very earth itself was shrouded in a veil of chaos and destruction. And yet even in the midst of such fury there was a strange beauty to behold, a testament to the unyielding spirit of these mighty warriors. In the end it was not clear who would emerge victorious from this maelstrom of steel. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, the warriors of both sides momentarily paused in their fight. The darkness was brief, however, for as soon as the moon rose high in the sky, illuminating the night with its silvery light, the battle resumed with renewed ferocity. King Virata, ruler of Matsya, found himself under attack by Suzarman, lord of Trigarta, who had descended from his chariot and was rushing towards him with a fierce determination. Virata's brothers, skilled in combat, joined their king, and together they clashed with the Trigartans. The sound of masses striking shields, swords clashing against armor, and battle axes biting into flesh filled the air as the two armies engaged. The battle raged on each side, trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. But then Suzarman's younger brother joined the fray, and with their combined strength they managed to overpower Virata's guards and capture him alive. The king was placed upon Suzarman's chariot, and as he sat there helpless and humiliated, his brothers were slaughtered by the Trigartans. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira, eldest of the Pandavas, watched from a distance, his eyes scanning the battlefield for any opportunity to intervene. He knew that if Virata fell into enemy hands, it would be a disaster for their kingdom and their people. So he called upon Bhema, his brother and warrior, to rescue the captured kingdom. Ever eager for battle, rushed forward with his bow in hand, shooting arrow after arrow at the Trigartans. His aim was true, and soon hundreds of enemy warriors fell before him. But as the fight raged on, Suzarman himself turned back to face Bhema, drawing his bowstring taut and firing arrow after arrow at the Pandava. The battle was intense, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. Yudhishthira fought bravely, slaying 1,000 Trigartans with his sword, while Nakula and Sahadeva shot arrows from their bows, taking down enemy warriors left and right. But Bhimma's prowess was unmatched. He seemed to be everywhere at once, striking down foe after foes. The fight reached its climax. Sazarman found himself facing off against Yudhishthira, who assailed him with a hail of arrows. The Trigartan king fought valiantly, but in the end it was Bhimma who emerged victorious, seizing Sazarman by the hair and dashing him to the ground. As Sazarman lay there battered and helpless, Bhimma stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion. He glared down at the Trigartan king, his eyes blazing with fury, but then remembering the words of their father. In the midst of celebration and victory, King Virata's kingdom was once again threatened. The king had just been liberated from his slavery by Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, and they were basking in the glory of their triumph. But as they prepared to return home, a new challenge emerged. The Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, had invaded the Matsya kingdom, driven off its cowards and stolen 60,000 of its prized kine. A king's chief coward, overcome with grief and fear, rushed into the city to inform King Virata of the disaster. Upon hearing the news, the king was filled with anxiety and concern for his kingdom. He summoned his son Dhumanjaya and ordered him to take action. "Immediately rise, my son," he said. "Bring back our cattle. You are the hero of our kingdom, and it is up to you to save us from this Chrysis the coward." Still reeling from the news, encouraged Dhumanjaya to take on the challenge. He reminded him that his father boasted about him in court, saying he was a skilled warrior and a true defender of their people's honor. With newfound determination, Dhumanjaya set out to confront the Kauravas. The coward had spoken words of encouragement, likening Dhumanjaya's bow to a vina, a musical instrument that produced sweet sounds when its strings were plucked. "Strike in the midst of your enemies like a vina," he said. "Let your arrows be like musical notes, and let your steeds be as swift as the wind." As Dhumanjaya prepared for battle, the city erupted into celebration. The news of his father's victory had been proclaimed to the people, and they were eager to see their hero return triumphant. The sound of drums and flutes filled the air, and the women of the kingdom came out to cheer on their brave prince. Dhumanjaya, now determined to prove himself worthy of his father's praise, mounted his chariot and set off towards the Kauravas with a fire cry. He charged into battle, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The fate of his kingdom hung in the balance, but with courage in his heart and the encouragement of his people, Dhumanjaya was determined to emerge victorious. In the midst of a bustling palace, Uttara, the prince of the Magadha kingdom, stood resolute and determined. Her eyes gleamed with a fire's inner light as she addressed her attendants. "I am firm in my skills with the bow, but I need a charioteer who is skilled in the management of horses to accompany me on this perilous quest." She paused, surveying the assembly before her. "Look for someone who can handle the reins of my steeds, and we shall set out at once." Her words echoed through the palace corridors, carrying with them a sense of urgency. The memory of her charioteer's fall in battle still lingered, and she was eager to reclaim what had been taken from her, the sacred kind that had been spirited away by the Kauravas. Her eyes flashed with a fierce determination as she declared, "I will vanquish Duryodhana, Bhishma, Karna, and Kripa in battle, just as I would shatter the Dandavas with the thunderbolt's power." The assembled Kauravas, she boasted, would soon tremble at her prowess. As she spoke, a subtle smile played on the lips of Arjuna, who stood nearby. He knew his wife Draupadi was listening intently to Uttara's words. He turned to her and whispered in private, "Tell Uttara that Vryanula, my former charioteer, is at hand. He will be more than capable of handling the reins of her horses." Draupadi's eyes sparkled with understanding as she nodded in agreement. However, when Arjuna repeated his words to Uttara, Anjali could not remain silent. She stepped forward, a hint of mischief dancing in her eyes. "Vryanula, yes, I know him well," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was the charioteer of my husband during the great battle at Khandava. Together they conquered all creatures and brought glory to the Pandavas." Her words dripped with admiration for Vryanula's prowess. Uttara's eyes widened in surprise as she listened to Panchali's tale. "You know him?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Draupadi smiled knowingly, but Uttara remained skeptical. "I cannot ask him myself," she said finally, "but if you vouch for his abilities, I will follow your advice." Draupadi's words carried great weight, and Uttara nodded in agreement. She turned to her sister and instructed, "Go fetch Vryanula from the dancing hall where he is staying in disguise." With a swift nod, Draupadi hastened off towards the hall, determined to bring back the hero who would be her brother's charioteer. As she departed, in the kingdom of Virata, Princess Ira, A young woman renowned for her beauty and kindness stood in the midst of her female attendants. Her eyes gleamed with concern as she addressed Arjuna, the son of Pandu, who had come to her aid. Arjuna, she said, the Kuras are driving away our kind, and my brother will soon set out to conquer them. His charioteer was slain in battle, and I fear he may not find a worthy replacement. But Sarandrai has spoken of your skill in managing steeds. Arjuna, will you act as my brother's charioteer? Arjuna. The mighty warrior smiled at her words. He knew that she spoke out of affection for him and her brother, but he also understood the gravity of the situation. The Kuras were a formidable foe led by the great warriors Bhishma. Drona and Kripatara's words had stirred something within Arjuna. He remembered his past victories with Vryanala. As his charioteer, how they had conquered the whole earth together. He knew that he could not refuse Uttara's request. Very well, he said to her, I will act as your brother's charioteer. But I must warn you, my skills may be rusty after so many years. Uttara smiled and thanked him. But Arjuna was already making light of the situation. He began to put on his armor, but in a comical display of ignorance he struggled with the coat of mail. The maidens watching laughed at his antics, and Uttara herself had to intervene. Let me help you, Arjuna, she said, as she carefully fitted him into the armor. As they prepared for battle, Arjuna's friend Vryanala stood beside him, ready to hold the reins of his steeds. The two warriors set out towards the Kuru army, their chariot decorated with a lion's banner and surrounded by the dust of innumerable flags. The sight that greeted them was awe-inspiring. The Kuru's army stretched as far as the eye could see, its banners fluttering in the wind like a vast sea or a forest of trees moving through the sky. Arjuna's heart swelled with determination as he beheld his enemies, but when they drew closer, Uttara's courage faltered. She trembled at the sight of so many brave warriors arrayed against them. The bristles on her body stood on end, and she spoke to Arjuna, a voice filled with fear. Arjuna, I dare not fight with the Kuras. See, my bristles have stood on their ends. I'm incapable of battling this countless host. But Arjuna's words were like balm to her soul. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, a sense of unease settled over the Kuras. Their great warriors, led by Bhishma and Drona, beheld a figure emerging from the distance. The stranger sat atop a chariot, dressed in attire unlike any they had seen before, the mix of masculine and feminine garb that seemed to defy explanations. The warrior approached. The Kauravas' hearts grew heavy with foreboding. They suspected this enigmatic figure might be none other than Arjuna, the Pandava prince, known for his unwavering dedication to battle. The air was thick with tension as Drona, son of Bharadwaja, spoke up. Behold, the winds howl and gravel showers down upon us like a tempest. The sky itself seemed shrouded in an eerie gray haze. Our very arms seemed to be bursting forth from their scabbards. Heater for battle. Jackals yelp and horses weep as if sensing some calamity, and our banners tremble, though none had touched them. Drola's words hung heavy with portent, and the Kauravas exchanged nervous glances. He continued, these inauspicious signs bespeak a great danger drawing near. Stay vigilant, protect yourselves and array your troops for battle. Prepare to face slaughter and safeguard our sacred kind. The wise preceptor's words stoked the flames of anxiety within the caravans. Bhishma, ever the stalwart leader, stepped forward to address Drola's concerns. O descendant of Ganges, he said, I believe this enigmatic warrior is indeed Kirti, son of Pritha. Arjuna in disguise. His banner bears the sign of Lanka's lord, and I fear he comes to vanquish us today. Ishwa's words dripped with conviction. Karna, ever the boastful one, scoffed at Drola's warnings. You always stole the virtues of Falguna, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. But Arjuna is not even a 16th part as mighty as myself or Duryodhana. The prince's words sparked indignation within the caravans. Duryodhana, ever eager for battle, seized upon Karna's words. If this be indeed Partha, he declared, then my purpose has already been fulfilled, for if traced out, the Pandavas shall have to wander for 12 years. Once more his eyes gleamed with a fierce determination. Bhishma and Drona, along with Kripa and Drola's son, applauded Duryodhana's boldness. Your manliness is unimpeachable, they exclaimed in approval as the warrior in question continued to draw closer. The battle-scarred veterans steeled themselves for. As Vesapayana's words carried on the wind, Arjuna gazed upon the young prince Uttara with a discerning eye. He had reached the samit tree, its branches heavy with the weight of time, and assessed the prince's mettle in battle. Virata's son stood before him, his features delicate, his countenance untested by the fires of combat. Arjuna's voice was low and commanding as he spoke to Uttara. "Quickly, my child," he said, "ascertain that you have bows suitable for a warrior of your stature, for I fear that yours may falter beneath my strength, my weight." When we faced the enemy together, he glanced at the tree above them, its foliage thick and impenetrable. "Climb up there, Duinjaya," he said, using the prince title with a nod of respect, "for the bows and arrows, banners, and coats of mail of my brothers away." You within Uttara's eyes widened as he gazed at Arjuna, his mind racing to comprehend the warrior's words. He had never seen anyone like Arjuna before. Strong, yet gentle, fierce, yet kind. The young prince's heart swelled with a sense of awe and trepidation as he nodded to Arjuna's command with a burst of agility. Uttara sprang up the tree, his hands grasping for handholds in the gnarled bark. He climbed high the branches, creaking beneath his weight until finally he reached the tree-top. There, tied to sturdy limbs, lay the bows and arrows of Arjuna's brothers, Yudhishthira and Vivatsu, and the twins. Each bow shone with a light of its own, its energy palpable in the still air, and then nestled among them Arjuna's Gandava glimmered like a star. Its wood was dark and polished, adorned with gold that seemed to dance in the sunlight. Large as a palmyra tree, it stood apart from the others, a bough of unyielding might, capable of stretching the boundaries of a kingdom, smooth and broad without a knot. Its beauty was almost mesmerizing. Uttara's fingers reached out to touch the Gandava, his heart pounding with excitement. He felt the weight of his story in this moment, the weight of 1,000 battles fought, of heroes fallen, of empires risen and fallen. The young prince knew that he held something greater than mere arms within his grasp. The essence of Arjuna's powers. Uttara descended from the tree. The bows and arrows swung gently in the breeze, their presence seeming to reverberate through the air like a promise. Arjuna watched him with an approving gaze, his eyes gleaming with a sense of satisfaction, for he knew that in the midst of a dense force, Prince Uttara, heir to the throne of the Matsya, stood before Vrihanala, his guide and mentor. The prince's eyes widened with concern as he scanned the tree above them, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. "What is this I've heard?" Uttara asked, his voice laced with trepidation. "A corpse is tied to that tree. How can it be? As a prince of noble birth and a Kshatriya by lineage, I am bound by certain duties and vows. It would not be fitting for me to touch the dead, lest I become polluted and impure." Vrihanala's expression remained calm, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Fear not, young prince," he said. "There is no corpse tied to that tree. You see only boughs shining brightly in the sunlight." Uttara's brow furrowed skeptically. "But how can I trust my eyes?" he asked, taking a step back. "I have heard tales of enchanted trees and magical creatures. Perhaps this tree holds some dark secret." Vrihanala chuckled, his voice low and soothing. "No, Uttara. This is simply a tree, its branches heavy with the weight of boughs. Your father's famous Gandava, along with 4 other magnificent boughs, hang from its limbs." As if summoned by Vrihanala's words, a figure emerged from behind the tree. Virata's son, decked in earrings and finery, alighted from his chariot and approached the tree. His eyes shone with a mix of curiosity and trepidation as he began to climb the summit. Arjuna, slayer of enemies and wielder of the Gandava, remained seated on his chariot, watching his friend's every move speedily bring down those bows from the top of the tree. He called out to Virata's son, his voice carrying across the clearing. The prince hesitated for a moment before beginning his ascent. As he reached the branches, he spotted the magnificent boughs, their forms like sighing snakes coiled and ready to strike. The splendor of the boughs shone with an otherworldly light, as if the very planets had descended from the heavens to join them. Uttara's eyes grew wide, his face pale with fear. He reached out a trembling hand, touching the Gandava's majestic form. The moment he made contact, the bristles on his body stood on end, and he felt an electric jolt course through him. His voice trembled as he spoke to Arjuna. "O noble warrior, behold this wonder. These bows shine with a radiance that defies mortal comprehension." As Uttara's words faded away, the tree seemed to come alive, its branches swaying in time with the prince racing. As the sun began to set on the vast expanse of the battlefield, Uttara's eyes widened in awe as she beheld a magnificent array of arms and armor before her. She had been traveling with her companion Vrihanala for days, and they had finally arrived at the camp of the great warrior King Arjuna. But it was not Arjuna himself who stood before her holding the reins of this wondrous collection of arms. a bow with 100 golden bowses, its ends shining like the brightest star. Uttara's curiosity got the better of her as she approached Raihanula, and asked to what warrior of fame does this excellent bow belong, whose is it that holds such radiant power. She gazed at the staff adorned with golden elephants that shone like molten gold. The bow itself was a marvel. Its sides were smooth and easy to hold, as if crafted by the gods themselves. Raihanula's eyes seemed to cloud over for a moment, as if lost in thought, before he replied, "This is indeed a bow fit for the gods, Uttara. Its beauty is matched only by its power." He gestured to the quiver slung over his shoulder, which held a rose with wings around their shafts numbering 1,000, each one a marvel of craftsmanship. Uttara's gaze wandered to the sable quiver bearing 5 images of tigers, which held 10 boar-eared arrows. "Whose are these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raihanula nodded towards Arjuna, who stood quietly by, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "These are but a few of the many arms that lie before us," he said, as Uttara continued to marvel at the array of arms. Her eyes settled upon a sword with the mark of a toad on its blade, a symbol of its irresistible power. The scabbard was made from variegated tiger skin, and the hilt shone like gold in the fading light. "Whose is this?" she asked once more, her voice filled with wonder. Raihanula's eyes seemed to cloud over again as he replied, "This sword belongs to Arjuna himself, a warrior feared by all who oppose him." He gestured towards the king, who stood motionless, his gaze still fixed on some distant point. Uttara's eyes widened in awe as she gazed upon the magnificent array of arms before her, each one a testament to the power and skill of the great warrior Arjuna. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a warm orange glow. Uttara turned to Raihanula with a look of reverence. "Great is my wonder at the sight of all these excellent objects," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Raihanula nodded. In the midst of a grand assembly, Raihanula began to speak about the legendary bows of the Pandavas. "Tell me, what is it that you wish to know first?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. The question was directed at Virata's son, who leaned forward with interest. "I would like to hear about Arjuna's bow Gandhava," he replied, his voice filled with awe. Raihanula smiled, and with a sweep of his hand began to recount the tale of the mighty bow of Gandhava. The very mention of its name sends shivers down the spines of gods and mortals alike. This magnificent bow is adorned with gold, its wood polished to a sheen that seems almost divine. Its size is enormous, rivaling the grandeur of 100,000 other bows combined, and yet it is as smooth and not free as a summer breeze on a cloudless day. As Raihanula spoke, his words wove a tapestry of wonder around the assembly. "Gandhava has been worshipped by the gods themselves," he continued. "Shiva held it for 1,000 years, followed by Prajapati for 503 years. Then Sakra, the king of the gods, grasped it for 80 years before Soma took hold of it. For 5 centuries, Varuna, the lord of the Unseen, possessed it for 100 years, until finally Parthasarna in Swetavhanda claimed it as his own." The assembly was entranced by Raihanula's narrative, their minds conjuring images of the mighty bow and its storied past. "And what of Arjuna's sword?" someone asked, breaking the spell. Raihanula smiled again and began to describe the blade that had been forged in the heart of a dragon. "Arjuna's sword is a marvel of craftsmanship, its blade long and curved like a serpent's tongue. Its sheath is made from the skin of a mighty tiger, while its golden hilt shines like the sun on a summer morning. This is no ordinary sword. It has been tempered in the fires of battle, and its strength is matched only by Arjuna's unyielding spirit." As Raihanula finished speaking, the assembly erupted into a chorus of woos, and as each Pandava brother had his own unique bow and sword, each one imbued with its own special character and his story. Emma's bow was adorned with golden images of Indra Gopikas, while Yudhishthira's quiver shone like the sun itself. Nakila's arrows blazed with a fierce inner light capable of piercing even the strongest armor. Head of a sword, on the other hand, seemed to shimmer and dance in the light. Its blade, in a lush meadow surrounded by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft chirping of birds. Uttara, the prince of Virata, sat in deep contemplation. His eyes wandered towards a group of warriors who had arrived at his kingdom, their armor glistening in the sunlight. Among them was a man with striking features, piercing red eyes, and arms as strong as an elephant's trunk. Utter's curiosity got the better of him, and he approached the warrior. "Who are you?" Uttera asked, his voice filled with wonder. "These weapons adorned with gold belonging to the light-handed and high-souled Partha look exceedingly beautiful. But where are that Arjuna, the son of Pritha and Yudhishthira, of the Kuru race, and Nakula and Sahadeva and Bhimesna, the sons of Pandu, having lost their kingdom at this, the high-souled Pandavas capable of destroying all foes are no longer heard of. Where also is Draupadi, the princess of Panchala, famed as the gem among women who followed the sons of Pandu after their defeat at this to the force?" The warrior Arjuna smiled humbly and replied, "I am Arjuna, called also Partha. Thy father's courser is Yudhishthira, and thy father's cook Vallabha is Bhimesna. The groom of horses is Nakula, and Sahadeva is in the Kalpan, and know thou that the Saran Tri is Draupadi, for whose sake the Kikikas have been slain." Under his eyes widened with surprise, but he was not convinced. "I would believe all this if thou canst enumerate the 10 names of Partha previously heard by me." He exclaimed. Arjuna nodded and began to recite his names. "Listen thou and compare them with what thou hadst heard before. They are Arjuna, Phalguna, Jishu, Kiritan, Switavhana, Vivatsa, Vijaya, Krishna, Savi, Sachin, and Dhananjaya." Uttera's curiosity was piqued. "Tell me truly, why art thou called Vijaya, and why Switavhana? Why art thou named Krishna, and why Arjuna, and Phalguna, and Jishu, and Kiritan, and Vivatsa, and for what art thou Dhananjaya and Savi, Sachin?" He asked. Arjuna's eyes sparkled as he began to explain the origin of his names. "They called me Dhananjaya because I lived in the midst of wealth, having subjugated all the countries and taking away their treasures. They called me Vijaya because when I go out to battle with invincible kings, I never return from. In the midst of war-torn Kurukshetra." Uttera, the son of Virata, stood before Arjuna. The legendary warrior, O hero, Uttera, said, "Mounting on this large car with myself as driver, which division of the hostile army wouldst thou penetrate, commanded by thee? I would drive thee thither." Arjuna's eyes gleamed with confidence as he replied, "I am pleased with thee, O Teja. Among men thou hast no cause for fear. I will rout all thy foes in battle, O great warrior, accomplishing great and terrible feats. In the melee I will fight with thy foes." He instructed Uttera to tie quickly all those quivers to his car, and take a sword of polished blade adorned with gold. Uttera's eyes widened as he beheld Arjuna's determination. Hearing these words of Arjuna, "Vesampayana," continued Uttera, "cast off all inactivity," and he speedily alighted from the tree, bringing with him Arjuna's weapons, as Arjuna addressed him, saying, "Yes, I will fight with the Kurus, and recover the kind protected by me. The top of this car will be to thee." At a citadel, Uttera's fear began to dissipate. Uttera's admiration for Arjuna grew as he beheld his prowess. "I am no longer afraid of these," he said. "I know the steadiness in battle, which is even like unto that of Kesava or Indra himself." But then a sudden doubt crept into his mind. "Foolish as I am incapable of arriving at certain conclusion. By what distressful circumstances could a person of such handsome limbs and auspicious signs become deprived of manhood?" Arjuna smiled reassuringly, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "I tell thee truly that I am only observing this vow for a whole year, agreeable to the behest of my elder brother." He said, "Although of mighty arms, I am not truly one of the neuter sex, but I have adopted this vow eulogism from subservience to another's will, and from desire of religious merit." Uttera's eyes widened in understanding as Arjuna revealed his secret. "Thou hast conferred a great favor on me today," he said. "I now find that my suspicion was not altogether unfounded." He realized that such a person as Arjuna, with his majestic appearance and unwavering determination, could not be of the neuter sex. As Uttera's fear dissipated, he declared, "I have now, and only in battle, I can now fight with the celestials themselves. My fears have been dispelled." He boasted of his skills as a charioteer trained by a learned preceptor, and proudly, as the sun rose over the vast expanse of the battlefield, Arjuna, son of Pandu, prepared for his journey. He made Uttera, a young prince, his charioteer, and set out to circumambulate the sacred Samat tree, taking all his weapons with him. As they rode, Arjuna carefully deposited the banner bearing the figure of a lion at the foot of the tree, and hoisted in its place a new banner, one that shone like gold, and bore the image of an ape with a lion's tail. This was no ordinary banner, for it had been crafted by Viswakarman himself, infused with celestial magic. As they rode northwards, Arjuna blew his conch shell known as Panchajaniya, and its thunderous sound sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. The steeds that pulled Arjuna's chariot dropped to their knees in fear, and Uttara, overcome with terror, sat down on the vehicle clinging to it for dear life. But Arjuna, the unflappable warrior, took control of the reins himself and gently coaxed the horses back onto their feet as he comforted Uttara, who was still trembling with fear. Arjuna spoke words of encouragement. Fear not, O prince, you are a Kshatriya by birth. Why should you be dispirited in the face of battle? Have you never heard the blare of manikins and trumpets before? But Uttara's eyes were wide with wonder and awe, for he had never seen anything like this before. A sound of Arjuna's conch shell still echoed through the air as they rode on. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath their feet, and the very clouds appeared to darken in response to the warrior's presence. Drona, a wise and seasoned warrior, gazed upon the scene with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He knew that something momentous was unfolding before his eyes. Behold, Drona exclaimed to King Dhritarashtra, this cannot be any ordinary warrior. The very earth trembles beneath his feet, and our steeds are dispirited, our animals howl in fear, and the crows perch upon our banners, as if sensing a great calamity. Vultures wheel overhead, foretelling a heavy destruction of Kshatriyas in battle. Drona's words were laced with concern, for he knew that Arjuna's presence on the battlefield was not to be taken lightly. As the armies of the Pandavas and the Kauravas faced off against each other, the omens grew more ominous. The very fabric of reality seemed to be torn apart by the sheer power of Arjuna's presence. And yet amidst all this chaos and uncertainty, Arjuna remained steadfast, his conch shell. The sun beat down upon the dusty plains as King Duryodhana stood atop his chariot surveying the gathered warriors before him. His eyes locked onto Bhishma, the venerable warrior and preceptor who sat coldly on his own chariot, surrounded by a retinue of skilled fighters. Speak, Bhishma. Duryodhana called out, his voice carrying across the battlefield. We have come to fight against the Matsyas, those treacherous foes who have long oppressed our allies, the Trigartas. But now it seems, Arjuna, that divine archer has appeared on the scene. What does this mean for us? Bhishma's expression remained serene, but Duryodhana could sense a hint of unease beneath his calm exterior. It is true, O king, Bhishma replied, his voice measured and deliberate. The Pandavas have been in exile for 12 years, as promised to your father Dhritarashtra. But if Arjuna has come before the term of their exile is at an end, they must spend another 12 years in the wilderness. Duryodhana's face darkened with anger and frustration. This is preposterous, he exclaimed. We have already seized the Trigartas cattle, and we will not be deterred by the arrival of this one warrior. We will fight on no matter who stands before us. Karna, that mighty Kar warrior, stepped forward to offer his own counsel. Let us not be swayed by Bhishma's doubts, he said, his voice dripping with confidence. We have come too far and sacrificed too much to turn back now. Besides, why is a single warrior against the might of our army? As Karna spoke, Duryodhana's eyes narrowed in suspicion. He sensed that Bhishma was not as committed to their cause as he seemed. You are too soft on the Pandavas, Bhishma. Duryodhana accused your affection for Arjuna. It is well known, and it clouds your judgment. Bhishma's expression remained calm, but Karna sensed a hint of indignation beneath his tranquil surface. I am merely stating the facts, O king, Bhishma replied, but I fear that Drona, our great preceptor, may be swayed by his own biases. He is too close to the Pandavas, and it clouds his judgment. Duryodhana's face twisted with anger, but Karna stepped forward to intervene. Let us not forget our duty, he said, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. We have come to fight for our allies, and we will not be swayed by doubts or fears. We must make arrangements for battle, and we will emerge victorious in the end. As Karna spoke, the sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Karna, the mighty son of Shurya, stood tall, his eyes scanning the enemy lines with a fierce intensity. He beheld the Pandavas led by Arjuna, Vivatsu, and the others, their faces set in determination. Karna's gaze lingered on Arjuna, the legendary warrior who had been prophesied to vanquish him. But Karna was not one to back down from a challenge. His voice boomed out across the battlefield, echoing off the trees, as he declared his intent to resist the enemy with all his might. I will unleash my arrows like gliding snakes, he cried, straight and flying, sure of aim. Shot from my bow, they will cover Partha all over like locusts, shrouding a tree. His words were laced with confidence, for Karna knew that he was no ordinary warrior. He had spent years honing his skills practicing the ancient arts of archery and combatis. He spoke. Karna's hands moved swiftly to string his mighty bow, its sinewy cord creaking under the strain. His fingers danced across the strings, drawing back the arrow with a smooth, practiced motion. The air was filled with the sweet scent of sandalwood as he prepared for battle. Ever that so Arjuna's brother stood tall beside him, his eyes burning with determination. But Karna knew that Vivatsa would not be able to withstand his might. He will strike me, but mildly in this conflict, Karna declared, for I am the superior warrior. As he spoke, a fierce energy seemed to build within Karna's frame. His eyes blazed like the sun as he summoned his legendary bow, the one forged by the great god of war, Indra. Its golden wings glinted in the fading light, and its arrows shone with a deadly precision. The air was filled with an electric tension as Karna launched into battle. His arrows flew swift and true, piercing the enemy lines like venomous snakes through an anthill. The sound of his bowstring echoed across the battlefield, a deep resonant note that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. That Arjuna's name was soon to be heard on all sides as Karna's arrows rained down upon him. His car was broken, his horses killed, and himself left, sighing like a snake. The Kauravas watched in awe as their greatest warrior clashed with the mighty son of Shurian. Yet, despite the ferocity of the battle, Karna's words echoed through the ages. Let my flying arrows wing it, and depressed at the middle present the spectacle of the coursing of fireflies through the welkin. For in that moment he was not. In the midst of a heated debate, Kripa addressed Radeya. Your heart is forever bent on war, Radeya. You fail to comprehend the true nature of things and their consequences. The scriptures present various methods for achieving success, but one must consider the timing and circumstances. A battle may be considered the most sinful of actions, reserved only for times when fortune smiles upon us. Radeya's impulsive nature was a concern for Kripa, who knew that Radeya was prone to acting without thinking through the consequences. You know of Arjuna's prowess, Kripa continued. He alone saved our kin from the Gandharvas and satiated Ignite with his devotion. He spent 5 years as a Brahmacharan on the slopes of Himavat, and it was he who took Savadra on his chariot to challenge Krishna to single combat. Kripa's words painted a vivid picture of Arjuna's remarkable achievements. But Radeya's ambition remained unshaken. He had studied the science of warfare under Indra himself and had single-handedly vanquished numerous foes, including Chitrasna, the king of the Gandharvas, and his invincible troops. Kripa's eyes widened in alarm as he gazed at Radeya. You aspire to match wits with Arjuna, but what have you achieved on your own? Have you even come close to his feats? He paused, his voice laced with skepticism. Even Indra himself would not dare challenge Arjuna in battle. Radeya's face reddened as Kripa continued to scold him. Your desire to fight Arjuna is akin to trying to grasp a snake by the fangs or riding an enraged elephant without a hook. You wish to walk through a blazing fire dressed in silken robes and smeared with clarified butter. Who among us would attempt such folly? Kripa's words dripped with disdain for Radeya's foolish ambition. You are no match for Arjuna, not even as skilled warriors like ourselves. We have been deceived by him before, and he will not hesitate to annihilate us again if we provoke him. The assembly fell silent as Kripa concluded his impassioned speech. The air was heavy with tension, and Radeya's face reflected the weight of his own folly. Let our troops stand arrayed in ranks, Kripa declared, and let us, 6 great bowmen, Drona, Duryodhana, Ishmet, yourself, Drona's son, and I, fight alongside them against Arjuna. The assembly erupted into a cacophony of sounds as the warriors readied themselves for battle. But Kripa's words hung in the air like a warning. Do not act rashly, Radeya. We are no match for. In the midst of a heated assembly, a Swathaman stood tall, his eyes blazing with conviction as he addressed Karna, the mighty warrior. The kind have not yet been won, he said, his voice steady and calm. Nor have they crossed the boundary of their owner's dominions, nor have they reached Hastinapura. Why do you boast of yourself, Karna? You who have vanquished countless battles, acquired enormous wealth, and conquered hostile hosts. Swathaman paused, surveying the assembly with a discerning gaze. True, Karos speak not of their prowess. He continued, fire burns silently. The sun shines without fanfare, and the earth bears creatures without boasting of its creations. He turned to Karna. Once more a Brahmana should perform sacrifices himself, while a Kshatriya should vanquish his enemies with honor. But you, Karna, have obtained your wealth through deceit and fraud like a vendor of meat. The assembly fell silent as Aswathaman's words cut deep into the hearts of the listeners. He spoke of the Pandavas who had acquired their sovereignty through righteous means, always acting respectfully towards their superiors, even when hostile to them. What Kshatriya is there that has obtained the kingdom by this? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. You have robbed the Pandavas of their wealth, and yet you boast of your exploits. Aswathaman's eyes flashed with anger as he recalled the events of the past. He spoke of Draupadi, who had been dragged to court while ill, and wearing only one raiment. The mighty root of the Pandava tree had been cut down, leaving them vulnerable to attack. The son of Pandu is incapable of forgiving the sufferings of his wife. Aswathaman declared, Dhananjaya comes here for the destruction of the sons of Dhritarashtra. Trikarna snorted in derision, but Aswathaman pressed on, his words dripping with venom. You may have vanquished many battles, Karna, but you are no match for Dhananjaya. He is the slayer of foes equal to Vasudeva himself in battle prowess, counteracting celestial and human weapons alike. What man can stand against Arjuna? The assembly fell silent once more as Aswathaman's words hung in the air like a challenge. Aswathaman turned to Karna. Once more his voice cold and detached. Employ the means you used in the match at this, he said, the same deceit and fraud that won you Indraprastha and dragged Krishna to the assembly. He gestured towards Sakanai, the prince of Gandhara, who was seated nearby. Let him fight, now with his cunning and guile. But I warn you, Karna, the Gandhava. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a warm orange glow over the assembled warriors. Bhishma, the venerable elder and commander-in-chief, stood tall, his eyes scanning the ranks with a discerning gaze. He spoke in measured tones, his words carrying weight and gravity. Karna, Drola's son, observes well, he said, nodding towards the young warrior. And Kripa, too, sees rightly, but it is only out of duty that Kama wishes to fight. No wise man can blame the preceptor for his actions. Bhishma paused, surveying the assembled warriors before continuing. However, I believe we must consider both time and place. We face 5 formidable adversaries, each as radiant as a sun at its zenith. Even those who are familiar with morality may be bewildered by their own interests. It is for this reason that I speak to you now, O king. Bhishma's words were laced with concern and wisdom. Karna, ever the loyal warrior, had spoken earlier to raise the spirits of his comrades. What Karna said was only meant to lift our drooping courage. Bhishma explained. He turned towards Drauna's son Aswathaman, who stood near by the preceptor's son. Forgive everything. The business at hand is grave indeed. Bhishma's words were a gentle reminder of the gravity of their situation. He spoke with reverence and respect for his peers, acknowledging the mastery of arms that resided in Drauna's son. Like light within the sun, as beauty is never separated from Chandramas, so are the Vedas and the Brahma weapon both established in you, he said, his voice filled with conviction. The assembled warriors listened intently as Bhishma continued to speak of the unity they must maintain in the face of adversity in the Vedas pureness. And old histories who saved Jamadagni would be Drauna's superior. He asked, his eyes twinkling with a hint of pride, to Duryodhana. Ever the loyal brother stepped forward to offer words of reconciliation. Let the preceptor grant his forgiveness, he said, and let peace be restored. Kama and Kripa stood by his side, their faces set in determination as the warriors gathered around him. Bhishma's words had profound effect on Drauna. The preceptor's anger slowly dissipated as he listened to Bhishma's gentle persuasion. His heart softened, and he spoke with a newfound calmness. I have already been appeased by the words spoken first by Bhishma, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Let arrangements be made so that Partha may not approach Duryodhana in battle. Drauna's words were laced with concern for his son Arjuna, who had yet. The venerable Bhishma stood before King Duryodhana, his eyes gleaming with a deep understanding of the wheel of time. The cycles of fate unfold with precision, he said, marked by Kalas and Kastas Muhurtas, and days, fortnights, and months, constellations and planets, seasons and years. And yet, my king, there is an imperceptible drift, a slippage that accumulates over the centuries. Calculating this wisely, I have determined that in 13 years we would be 5 months and 12 nights ahead of Skidila. Bhishma's words hung in the air like a challenge as he gazed at Duryodhana with an unyielding intensity. The Pandavas, he continued, have fulfilled their promise to the latter. Their virtue is unwavering, guided by the righteous Yudhishthira. They would not stoop to deceit, nor covet power through unfair means. If they had sought to seize the throne by any other means, we would have seen them display their prowess on the field of Duryodhana's face darkened, his jaw clenched in determination. I will not yield, he declared. The kingdom is mine, and I will not return it to those usurpers. Bhishma's expression remained impassive, but a hint of sadness crept into his voice. Listen to my counsel, O king, he said. Let us prepare for battle, but let us do so with caution. We must consider the consequences of our actions and weigh the odds of victory. The two men stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their decision hanging in the balance. Then Bhishma spoke again, his words carrying a sense of urgency. Let us divide our forces, he said. Take a fourth part of the army with you to the capital, and let another fourth escort the sacred kine. We will hold back half the troops, and I, Drona, Karna, Aswathaman, and Kripa will stand resolute against the Pandavas. We will withstand even the gods themselves, like the unshakable bank that stands firm against the surging sea. Duryodhana nodded, the fire splint in his eye. I will not falter, he said. Bhishma's expression remained calm, but a hint of resignation crept into his voice. He knew that the course was set, and that the fate of the Kauravas hung precariously in the balance. The king departed with his troops. Bhishma began to array the soldiers for battle. His eyes roved over the lines, ensuring that each warrior stood ready to face the challenge ahead. He turned to Drona, his voice carrying across the ranks. Stand thou in the center, O preceptor, he said. In the midst of a vast army, the Kauravas stood ready for battle, their banners fluttering in the wind. Among them, Arjuna's chariot thundered forward, its wheels rattling, and his bow Gandava singing out with each drawn string. The Kuras beheld his banner top shining brightly from afar, and heard the ominous rattle of his car, accompanied by the twang of his mighty bowdrum. The renowned teacher gazed upon Arjuna's approach, and spoke in awe. Behold, that is the banner top of Partha, shining like a beacon, and this is the noise of his chariot, while it is the mighty roar of the Ip on his flagstaff. Indeed, the Ip strikes terror into our hearts. He nodded. Two shafts shot by Arjuna whizzed past him, barely touching his ears, before coming to rest at his feet. As Drona finished speaking, Arjuna's charioteer Virata's son turned the steeds towards their noble master. Charioteer Arjuna said, Hold back the horses at this spot, where my arrows may reach the enemy. Let me see, where is the wretch Duryodhana? I will single him out and strike his head, for upon his defeat the others will regard themselves as defeated. He gazed about, taking in the array of Kuru warriors, Drona, his son Bhishma, Kripa, and Karna. Yet he saw no sign of their king. Leaving this army behind, Arjuna said to his charioteer, Proceed towards Sayadana's position. There will I fight, for there the battle will not be fruitless. His charioteer nodded in understanding, and turned the steeds towards Duryodhana's location. As Arjuna departed, Kripa sensed his intention and addressed his comrades, saying, This Vivatsa does not wish to engage at a distance from the king. Let us quickly fall upon the flanks of the advancing hero. He guessed that Arjuna sought to defeat Duryodhana alone, for none but the divine Krishna, or the god with 1,000 eyes, could equal him in battle. Meanwhile, Arjuna swiftly proceeded towards Duryodhana's division and announced himself by name. His arrows flew thick as locusts, covering the enemy troops and rendering them blind to all else. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the weight of his shafts, while the sky became overwhelmed with their sheer number. The soldiers, ready for battle, were so confounded that none could flee or even move from the field. They marveled at Arjuna's light-handedness, and applauded it mentally as he blew his gun's bristles, stood erect on the enemy lines. With the sun was high overhead as Arjuna, the renowned archer, rode towards Duryodhana with a fierce determination in his heart. His steeds, adorned with golden bridles, galloped swiftly, their manes flowing in the wind. The warriors of the Kuras watched with keen interest as Arjuna approached, their eyes fixed on the mighty bowman who had already proven his valor by recovering the stolen king. As Arjuna drew closer, the Kuru warriors, led by Chitrisna and Saint Ramajit, rushed to aid their Oli Karna. The air was filled with the sound of clashing steel as the two armies clashed in a frenzy of battle. Arjuna, his Gandava, while singing its deadly song, cut through the enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. His arrows flew swift and true, striking down warrior after warrior. Among them was Vaikarna, son of Virata, who had mounted his chariot to confront the young Pandava. But Arjuna's aim was true, and with a single shot he severed Vaikarna's bowstring, sending his flight staff crashing to the ground. The Kuru warrior fled in disarray, leaving behind his comrades to face The wrath of Arjuna Satruntipa, another mighty Kuru warrior, joined the fray, showering Arjuna with a rose as thick as a hailstorm. But the son of Pandu was not one to be intimidated with 5 swift shafts. He pierced Satruntipa's armor and sent him tumbling to the ground. His charioteer followed soon after, struck by 10 razor-sharp arrows. The battlefield was ablaze with the sound of clashing steel as Arjuna fought on his Gandhava, singing its deadly song. The Kuru warriors, led by Bhishma, were no match for the young, and it was kill and strength one by one. They fell before him, their chariots overturned, their armor shattered, but Karna, son of Shariya, was not to be underestimated. He rode into battle like a blazing fire at his bow, singing its deadly song as he clashed with Arjuna in a frenzy of steel and arrows. The 2 warriors exchanged blows, their bows singing in perfect harmony as they showered each other with arrows. The air was filled with the sound of